Right, we're going to move on to question 3 now. Okay, this is a question from Miranda Tippin, who's a member of the Hartley Witney Operation Noah group. Miranda.
Hi. Yes, my question is, can any government ever really fully engage in addressing climate change when politically they are pressured to appease the big corporations motivated by making profit at the expense of saving the planet? How does your party intend to counter this?
I'll direct that question to James R.
Yeah, I do not see a conflict between making profit and being environmentally aware. I think that we can make really good business out of being environmentally aware and getting the whole of the world much into a position of much less danger. I'd answer this in a different way as well, by saying we cannot afford, as a country or as a society or as the Western world, to ignore this issue any longer. I think we've ignored it for too long, and if we go on like this, we will be in even greater difficulty than we're in. The sea levels are rising. Since 1961, sea levels have risen by 2 millimetres a year. Since 1997, they've risen by 3 millimetres a year. The hottest 10 years of record have happened since 1997. The ice caps are melting at a rate of 3% a year. This is the sort of thing that will lead to world economic devastation unless we deal with it, and we can deal with it in conjunction with big business. So we're going to make it possible to make really good profits. I'm sorry about this, really good profits out of being green. And that's the way to go. Work with the people, work in the best interests of everybody, and get everybody wanting to achieve the same thing and benefiting from it. And we'll all go in the same direction. Otherwise, we'll all go in different directions. That would be useless.
Very good.
Yes, I think one of the historical problems of business in this country, certainly throughout my lifetime, has been that the focus has been on short-term profits, short-term benefits. There may need to be some change in company legislation to ensure that companies actually look beyond this year's balance statement to ensure that they make profit, but they actually have to look beyond today. They have to look at tomorrow. They have to be encouraged to look at tomorrow. There's nothing about looking to the future that would prevent anyone making a healthy profit to enable the business to survive. But in fact, the short-termism has actually harmed particularly British manufacturing. And if we're going to encourage the change in focus of the UK economy, we also need to ensure that focus is not just on green jobs, but it's on the long-term impact of those businesses.
Right, well, this particular problem actually needs a global response. Anything is possible. I mean, otherwise, why would we be in politics and seek election? Anything is possible if we try and win the argument. Because clearly, this position is unsustainable because of climate change. You're going to have more people moving from the developing world to industrialised nations, because either their islands are sinking or they're coming from regions where drought is devastating parts of Africa, or Bangladesh is going underwater, and it's going to put pressure on the industrialised world. So it's unsustainable. In the end, we're also going to pay the price, increased immigration to industrialised nations, etc. So we have to create, there has to be a carrot and stick approach. The carrot is you have to create the incentives to develop the green technology in the first place, to create the profits. I agree with James here on that particular point. We have to create those possibilities. I've seen in China how they actually have economic areas, and they actually give those incentives to create businesses in that model. Not necessarily green technologies, but you can see why the Chinese are far more competent and powerful in getting their economic power base going, because the incentives are there to create those businesses in those special economic areas. So it does need cooperation with other countries. We do need to be supporting Barack Obama in this. There are strong vested interests from corporations opposed to anything in the climate change agenda, because obviously it does affect their short-term profits. But if we do make it possible for corporations to see the profitability of investing in green technologies and seeing the argument that if we don't do something about it, the economic costs of doing nothing will be even greater, especially when people start moving around from areas which are no longer inhabitable. And I believe that Darfur is the first example of a war created by climate change, because you have competing people fighting over limited environmental resources.
Thank you. Any contributions from the floor, please?
Thank you. Ruth Jarman, also the Hartley Witney Operation No Group. James, I wish I could agree with you that there is no conflict between economic growth and the profitability of companies and dealing with climate change. And I'd like if you could just answer, how can we deal with Shell and BP and RBS and Lloyds and all those companies that are making a lot of money out of tar sands? And the science tells us that we cannot burn the unconventional fossil fuels on this planet, and you know that as well as the scientists know that we cannot burn the unconventional fossil fuels such as tar sands and have a future for our children.
One way we could deal with it is by accelerating the drive towards carbon capture. It is a concern that the proposal to have carbon capture so that the fossil fuels that we burn would not release carbon into the atmosphere. Those proposals have still not had a contract granted on them, and we need to move that technology forward fast. We also need to move forward the renewables agenda. This country is the worst in Europe, amongst major developed countries, in the extent to which we use renewable energy. Amongst all countries in Europe, it is in front of Luxembourg and Malta, but behind all of the rest. And so we need to expand the issue of renewables. That will bring big profits to some companies. It might not bring big profits to BP and Shell in what they currently do. But if we kickstart of renewables in that way, then I think we can really work with the grain of human nature, which is always the most sensible way of dealing with it. Also, if we encourage people to insulate their own houses. I know that you've been trying to do this in Hartley Witney. There's more still to be done. So with a £6,500 deal for every household to get more green, that would help.
Any other comments or contributions?
Phil Stevens, I'm from North Walborough. I'm not convinced that we can actually save the planet and maintain the standard of living that we're accustomed to. And I think one of the big difficulties for politicians is actually to convince the public that they've got to swallow some of this medicine in order to save the planet. And I think myself this is the big issue and not so much the corporations.
Any other contributions? Miranda, do you want to make any closing comments, or are you happy as you are?
No, I'm happy as I am.
Okay, thank you very much.